Hello and welcome to the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today's Friday, February 2nd, 2024. Do interest rates matter? Do interest rates as set by the U.S. Federal Reserve matter, I should say, to Stronghold Digital Mining? Why or why not? So our major piece of debt is basically governed by the following two interest rates. 10%, which is fixed, plus the Secured Overnight Funding Rate, or SOFR. SOFR happens to be around whatever the Fed funds rate happens to be. So say like 5.25. Now, in our primary credit agreement that stipulates this 10% plus SOFR, it indicates that the lowest the SOFR portion of the interest rate can be is 3%. So even if the U.S. Federal Reserve were to drop interest rates to zero, all we'd really be seeing is about a 2% reduction in the interest rate that we pay as it relates to our major piece of debt. Hey, correct me if I'm wrong, right? If you've done the homework, if you've read this credit agreement, if you're seeing this slightly differently than I am, then let me know. But insofar as I'm able to determine, we're not necessarily some massive recipient of any change to, the Fed funds rate. Now, yeah, look, if they go from 5% to 50%, well, then, yeah, that's going to have a dramatic impact on Stronghold Digital Mining as well as the economy as a whole. That being said, it doesn't really look like interest rates are going to be going much higher from here. The question is, when, if at all, will they start to come down? Now, does it really impact Stronghold Digital Mining, though? Like, let's just kind of take a step back here. So when we look at our two primary revenue inputs, at least as of today, right, grid sales, or what happens to be the cost of energy, or alternatively hash prices, right? Basically, hey, what's the potential profitability associated with mining Bitcoin? When you look at both of those numbers, I think an argument could be made that we actually benefit in some ways from interest rates being higher. And the reason I say that, at least as it relates to the Bitcoin portion of this, is because arguably, if one were to assume, which isn't really a correct assumption for a reason I'll share with you in a moment, but if one were to assume that generally speaking, hey, if I want to bring more hash rate to market, I need to go into the debt market. I got to, basically get some loans to buy Bitcoin mining equipment to then, to stand up that hash rate, then hey, higher interest rates might dissuade me from wanting to do that. Now, the reason why that's not necessarily as much of a factor is because, at least amongst publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies, at least certainly here in the United States, well, hey, there's an alternative to debt, and that's equity, right? You can essentially just issue, tidal waves of equity and raise the capital that way to go from, whatever exahash capacity you happen to be at today to like a bazillion exahash and not have to really worry about the debt portion of it, right? Because there is no debt. You're essentially, right, raising the money through equity sales. So, okay, while that's not maybe as direct of a factor, I think an argument could also be made that, hey, when it comes to grid sales, do interest rates really affect the prices that we see in the grid? I would say natural gas prices, at least certainly in the two zones of the PJM grid, PJM Penelec and PJM PPNL, those are the two zones of the grid, right, that Stronghold Digital Mining has the opportunity to sell electricity into, as well as, of course, draw electricity from. But, those grid prices, again, you educate me if I'm off on this, but to the best of my understanding, they're not really that heavily influenced, if at all, based on the U.S. Federal Reserve, interest rate, right, like whatever that rate happens to be at. I do think, by contrast, natural gas prices can have a profound impact on grid prices. So again, if one were to do the analysis, are natural gas prices heavily influenced by, by interest rates? Maybe to the extent that a project wants to come online. Maybe, hey, I want to, create a 1 gigawatt natural gas power plant somewhere in the PJM grid that, that would potentially affect either PJM Penelec or PJM PPNL. Hey, maybe higher interest rates would dissuade me, as the example we gave with Bitcoin mining. Hey, maybe it would dissuade me from wanting to build that power plant because rates are, presumably higher than what I think they might be in the not too distant future. I don't necessarily see a correlation from a functional perspective between interest rates and our operations. That said, I mean, at least certainly not with interest rates at 5%. Again, if they go to 20, 30%, then yeah, sure, that's going to affect the SOFR, or the secured overnight funding rate portion of our debt, right? The interest that we pay. But at 5%, it's not that dramatic, you know what I mean, of an interest rate. I do think that it seems to have more of an impact on market sentiment, though. I mean, today, right, the United States, I believe, Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with some, jobs numbers, which jolted the markets because these numbers were incredibly robust. At least that's how they appeared on the surface. And so the presumption is, hey, you're not going to have the Fed lowering rates, at least potentially not lowering rates, given the robustness of these numbers, because it would appear as if though the Fed has more work to do to dampen the economy a bit, right? To really kind of help bring inflation down much closer to that 2% sort of like threshold that they're targeting. So we're seeing the stock price of Stronghold Digital Mining trading at around like $4.50 a share. It's, again, is it because of anything that we as a company are doing? No. I think it's more market sentiment driven. And as I said before, I don't know that interest rates, at least where we are right now as a company and based on our credit agreements and based on how we're sort of approaching, everything as it relates to our carbon capture initiative, I don't know that we're really at the mercy of interest rates, except for the overall macroeconomic sentiment that is so seemingly influenced by the potential for rates to come down or to stay the same, so on and so forth. Our stock price is taking a beating, but again, if I look at our basic metrics, if I look at our basic operational, kind of like where we are right now with operations, while its true hash prices are kind of on the lower side at the moment, they generally speaking have been very, very constructive. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what we did in January. I'd like to see what our Bitcoin production numbers were, and if there's any information about revenue numbers, and I'm definitely interested in seeing what, if anything, is mentioned about our carbon capture project. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today's Groundhog Day, and perhaps the world's most famous groundhog, Punxsutawney Phil, did not see his shadow. So we're potentially looking forward to an early spring. Maybe that can also foretell of an early bull run in not just the price of Bitcoin, which has held pretty steady, but ideally, right, in the price of Bitcoin mining stocks. We shall see. Okay, my friend, I hope you have a phenomenal weekend. Let's be positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other again sometime next week.